Well, hello, Pastor Ray Barnett here, and I welcome you to another edition of God's Answers for Anxiety and Depression. I'm in the same location that I was yesterday, except a little different spot. And I'm going to take you a quick walk around to give you an idea of this historic location. Let me turn you around here. This is what was known as lock number 28. I'll give you a shot of it. It was built in 1840, which of course would precede the American Civil War. If you look closely, you can see there's a nice vista. You got thunder coming in the background, but we're going to be okay. Lock number 28, also known as Yankee Hill. Here's the other side of it. And this is the place where the barges would come in. This was also known as the Erie Barge Canal, a part of the Mohawk River. You can see I'm the only car in the parking lot, which for our purposes will be good. This is a spot frequently visited by tourists and others coming through. There's a very long bike trail. It goes all the way to Buffalo. Right beyond those trees over here. That bike trail goes all the way to Buffalo. And you have people traveling from all these different states by bike. And they will come here and they will stop and just take a look at this. Now, where we're going to be is over here at the Putman grocery store. And what this was, the barges would stop here. All right, and then come across this bridge here. Actually, they wouldn't need a bridge. They could get off at the other side. And then come into the grocery store. Remember, we're talking about the middle of the 19th century. 1840, everything was completed. And just for a minute, just take a look at the size of some of these stones. Let me see if I can get a little closer in there. They're very, very large. Reminds you of something you would see in a temple. Aztec temple, perhaps even the temple of Herod, temple of Solomon. Anyway, Putman grocery store, right here. Now the door is not open because of our current situation, and I can't take you inside to show it to you. But we're going to be here on the porch, where there would often be people who would be sitting here just like I'm going to be. Maybe we can get a peek in the window, I don't know. And you can see how things used to be. Now you really can't see it too well. Excuse me, I still have a little touch of this laryngitis. There's a nice shot of the vista. It's well kept, well maintained, beautiful area. Once again, one of the perks of living in upstate New York. Many people are moving from New York because of taxes and so on. But there's still a lot of good here, at least for my purposes. So, just a little idea of where we're at, where I'm at. I think if I turned you this way, oh, sorry about that. Why do I look like I'm looking up in the air when I thought I was looking at the lens? I guess that's better. Okay, the vista's behind me. My face is in the camera. And because of the rain that is certainly coming, you could hear it. We're going to be underneath this porch for our little lesson today on anxiety and depression. Now, I just said about perks of living upstate or in New York State. And of course, the East Coast has so many, many historic sites. But I don't know how you are precisely, but I love people. I really do. I like being around people, but I also like an equal amount of solitude. And this is a great place to come for solitude. where you can meditate. We talked about that this week. Contemplate, talked about that this week. There's something about being alone, and I mean totally alone, that just clears the mind and helps you to, to think things through, to become rational in an irrational world, to start to get some sense of perspective in a world that's rapidly losing perspective. So, with our subject of anxiety and depression yesterday, I was concentrating on experience, the difference between knowing Bible verses and knowing the author of those verses. The difference between knowing what the Bible says and knowing the one who wrote it. Now, maybe you've never considered this, I don't know. But the purpose of reading the Bible, or of hearing preachers speak from the Bible and explain things about the Bible and what it says and what it meant, the entire purpose is that you would come to know the author. Be clear about this. The Bible is unambiguous when it comes to who wrote the Bible. 2 Timothy 3:16. For all scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be thoroughly furnished unto all good works. So the Bible, throughout, from Genesis on through the book of the Revelation, 66 books, constantly says, this is God speaking. And with that, the purpose of learning the Bible is so that you can know the author. Now, I shared with you yesterday that I'm reluctant to say it doesn't do any good just to know Bible verses because of my high regard for the Bible. But I think I'll use that phrase, that it's not entirely productive to just know verses about the Bible or from the Bible when you don't know the author. See, the purpose again of the Bible is so that you would come to know your Creator. Also, let me add that God only wrote one book, not like many authors where they have 5, 10, 20, 30, 100 books. Isaac Asimov, he wrote over 500 books. The purpose of the Bible, written by God, his only book, is that you would come to know Him. To know Him is to know peace. See, this is why I'm distinguishing between help for your anxiety and depression and so on from God's book as opposed to psychology and psychiatry. Now, I said something yesterday. It was a bit of an overstatement. I want to correct it. When I said that views on correcting anxiety and depression other than the Bible don't work, it was a bit of an overstatement. They have good things in psychology, in some of the techniques that are used, and of course in psychiatry some of the medicines that are used can be very helpful, and people need them. So I didn't want to be misunderstood on that. What I was actually trying to say yesterday is that the ultimate answer is Christ. Christ is called the King of Peace, or the Prince of Peace. And all peace comes from Him. And all peace is in Him. When we use the word Christian, what it implies is that Christ is in you, Christ in you, the hope of glory, the Apostle Paul wrote. Christ in you, the hope of glory. If Christ is in you, then all that belongs to Christ is likewise in you. And I'm not implying that you become God. That's a teaching that has been around, which is not only patently false concerning the Bible, it is ridiculous, as well as probably heretical as well. In any case, I'm not implying that you become God. I'm just simply saying that the fruit of the Spirit, right? Galatians chapter 5 is in Christ, and if Christ is in you, then you start to bear that fruit. Let me go through the fruit of the Spirit with you. 9 are listed. Excuse me. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance, which means self-control. All of these things are good for you and for others. This is how salvation works, what the Bible calls salvation, entrance into heaven. And we become good to ourselves, we become good to other people based on this one caveat. If people want to cooperate with God, and if they actually want to know peace, you would be surprised at the people who say they want an answer, they say they want peace, but in reality they don't, because they won't, as I've mentioned to you, they won't play by the rules. They won't obey the laws of God. Now that's not what you want. What you want is to be able to be found in sync, so to speak, in sync with the laws of God. You want to be found in a place where this Christ in you is imparting peace to you. When you have peace, you don't have anxiety. So let me mention this to you. Now, some of you who may have studied, I'll try to switch you around here a little bit. I'm trying to get a better view of the vista. Get my big head out of the way as well. Some of you who've studied law, logic, and the sciences as well, will be familiar with the Latin terms a posteriori, and the other is a priori. A posteriori means from the cause we have an effect, and from the effect we then can validate the cause. A priori means we don't have to draw conclusions about what will become, because we know. In other words, knowledge is not dependent on experience. That would be a priori. A posteriori would mean that knowledge is dependent on experience. Now this is used again in logic, it's used in law, it's used in sciences, the sciences. However, there's an interesting relationship between a posteriori and a priori, or priori, in that in the Bible we have both. We have to first begin with trusting God in His Word and what He says. That would be a priori, that we're going to come to know God without having yet to have experienced Him. Now, I actually dealt with this subject yesterday, but it was put into a different, it came from a different angle, but this is the same thing that I said yesterday. A priori is where we use an act of the will, and through an act of the will we believe what's written in the Bible. I'm certain that there's quite a few of you that are in that position right now, that you don't have much experience in the Bible, if any at all. And if you're going to overcome anxiety and depression and other things, you're going to have to begin with a trust in God through the Bible that will ultimately lead you to an a posteriori, that you will have experience from the original point of departure. So we look at the Bible and we say the knowledge of God, which is not quite accurate, but that we begin by trusting God first. God requires that. And then we go to a life, shared with you yesterday, as we go through our life, trusting God day by day, we have experience. That would be a posteriori. We know the Bible is true as we experience it, but we don't start out that way. We start out with not knowing too much and just casting ourselves upon God. Remember what 1 Peter 5:7 says, casting all your care upon Him because He cares for you. A loose translation would be casting all your anxiety on Him, all of it. Whatever is troubling you today, money, the family, the world, your children, your health, all of the above, and you cast it upon God. The Greek word, by the way, for casting means to throw it. Balo. Throw it. And you give it to God. And then you experience the peace of God. If it's truly let go. I mean, if you truly put it in God's hands, you will begin to experience a sublime peace. Much like we have in nature here. All right, just take a listen. You can hear the birds. Well, honestly, not much is disturbing them. As a matter of fact, nothing is disturbing them. How do we know much about their brains? I guess people have studied it. I haven't. But we know that they don't go to work, I mean the way we go to work. They do work. Well, they don't plant anything, but God always takes care of them. God always feeds them. He does that independent of us. Been doing that independent of us for a long, long time. So this is the reason why Jesus would say, consider the fowls of the air, the birds. Consider them. Think about them. By the way, this is a good example of why you want to get solitude. I mean, it doesn't have to be outdoors, but I think most of us would prefer to be in a quiet place. And I listen to the birds. I love birds. And I listen to the birds, and I'm reminded that they don't put crops into the ground the way farmers do for us. They're not worried about the cost of living. They're not engaged in the type of anxieties that we are. I can see a bird sitting on his perch over here right now, and I'm going to tell you, I don't think that he's worried one bit about how the world's going. Now, of course, I'm over dramatizing. I'm using hyperbolic expressions here to express the point, which is the fact that Jesus said to consider them, to think about them. This is the contemplation and the meditation I was talking about yesterday. Think about that bird. He's sitting right there. I can see him right here. I'm thinking about him right now, as Jesus said to. He doesn't have any concerns about where his food's coming from. It's going to come. He doesn't have any concerns about, well, I guess just about anything. And Jesus was the one, not Pastor Ray. Jesus was the one who said, well, take a look at him. And remind yourself how God takes care of them. How God feeds them. We as human beings, because we've sinned, all of us, broken God's law, we broke off the relationship with the Creator, which was and is restored through Jesus Christ. To come to know Christ is to come to know peace, but now we come into the experience part that I was accenting both yesterday and today. So again, I'm looking at my friend over there, the little bird, and I'm reminded, if he's not worried, why am I? We are the highest of God's creation. God created us in His image and in His likeness. Yet, we worry about things, concern ourselves with things that we cannot change. Most of you are familiar with it's attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And then it goes on to say, and the courage to change the things I can. Then thirdly and lastly, and the wisdom to know the difference. I want you today, as a kind of an assignment, to think about all the things you have no control over at all. And it's most of the things in your life. You can start with the most dramatic wars and famines and whatever. And then keep bringing it in to your children who are now grown, let's say. If they're small and they're still at the house, well, you still have some measure of control. But if they're grown and they're departed from the house, as our children are, all we have now is prayer and influence. That's it. I can't control what they do. Now that would be the closest to me, right? Other than my wife. So I have to be able to have the serenity to accept life the way it is. Not the way that I wish it would be, not the way that I think it should be, but the way that it is. I have to have the courage then to change whatever I can. Primarily that would be me, changing myself and everything that belongs to that. That would be the wisdom to know what I can change. And then in the end, to have the ultimate wisdom to know which is which, what that I can't change and that which I can. Now, two things here as we begin to finish. That is that if you don't change what you can change, you're going to be stuck with frustration, irritation, anger, depression, anxiety. If you don't change what you can change, well, it's foolish, right? It's foolish because you are producing your own anxiety and your own depression. However, if you're anxious and troubled about things that you cannot change, well, it's equally foolish to continue down that path when you can't change it through worry, through anxiety and depression, and you can't control it. And some people have had certainly very, very terrible circumstances in their lives, but you can't change, what happened in the marriage, what happened, tragic accidents, this type of thing. We have one of the largest car accidents in United States history up here just a few years ago. 20 some odd people died. One woman lost all her daughters. You heard about it. It was in the national news, not far from here. And that's tragic, and that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. But there got to come a point where you start to let go. And that's not easy. I'm not saying that this is easy. It's not. But it must be done. And you must do it. So let me pray for you today. If you are just beginning your walk with the Lord, trust Him with an act of the will, as I spoke about yesterday. As time goes on, you will be able to say, I know Him. And I know He will take care of me. Let me pray. Father, I just ask you to give peace, joy, comfort, whatever is needed today to those who have been watching. Help them to be able to hear this good advice. Change what you can, accept what you cannot change, and God, give them the wisdom to know the difference between the two. Grant them peace, God, and serenity in a world that is certainly out of our control, but it is not out of your control. Again, I hope these broadcasts are helping you. I am Pastor Ray Barnett. Please subscribe to the channel if you're interested in these teachings. Remember, I told you it's more like a class than it is an online 5-minute soundbite. Subscribe, hit the notification button, And God willing, I'll be with you here again tomorrow, and try to do these the stories of my life. Some of them are pretty humorous, and the lessons that I've learned that hopefully can apply to you. I'll keep you in my prayers. If you would keep me, please, in your prayers, I certainly need it, believe me. Okay, God bless you. Thanks for being with me here at Yankee Hill, at lock number 28, on the porch of the Putman family, who has graciously accommodated us today. God bless. Thanks for being with me.